Hello, everyone. Welcome to CXO Spice. CXO Spice is a platform for thought leaders to share point of view on innovation and explain how to make it happen in real world. I'm your host, Helen Yu. Today's topic is Agentic AI. Our guest speaker today is Bartley Richardson, who is the CTO of Agentic AI at NVIDIA. Hello, Bartley. Welcome to CXO Spice.
Helen, thank you for having me so much. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, likewise. So before we dive into our discussion today, please introduce yourself and your role at NVIDIA. I hope you share something that's not on LinkedIn.
Oh, there's a test. Yeah, sure. So hey, yeah, my name's Bartley, like Helen said. I've been in NVIDIA for a while now, since around 2017. A lot of different roles, like through that time in NVIDIA. But currently, what I do is I lead our engineering and product, and kind of strategically how we're thinking about agents, the agentic ecosystem, and kind of how can NVIDIA take a very NVIDIA stance on that, right? Like we're not a company that makes agentic frameworks. We're not a company that makes these very specific products for it, but we're an accelerated compute company. And so how can us as NVIDIA, with our unique kind of capabilities, inject that acceleration, that optimization, kind of bring different pieces of it together to even to make these agentic systems even more attainable, affordable, runnable, all these types of things. In that process at NVIDIA, I'm getting to your request about LinkedIn. In that process at NVIDIA, right, like I've gone through a lot of different things: data science, cybersecurity, right? I still lead our cybersecurity AI efforts, right, as well. And I got into this all because my background is compy with a PhD in computer science, right, in theoretical database systems. But it wasn't my first career choice. My first career choice was concert pianist.
Mm.
And I wanted to pursue that route, and I was told no for a lot of reasons. And so now here I am working on agents, right? And I have music as a hobby. So when I'm not doing agent work and things like that, I tend to dabble in a little bit of music.
Oh my God, I can't think of anyone better than you to be a guest speaker for this topic.
Uh,
When science and creativity gets together, you know what's going to happen. That's where innovation takes place, right? So just thrilled of having you, Bartley, as a CTO of Gentic AI. You are at the forefront of AI innovation. So let's start with the basic of the heart of today's topic. Let's say, what exactly is an AI agent?
yeah, believe it or not, we get this question a lot, right? And I'll preface this by saying there's so many different definitions of this, right, like out there. And you'll go, and if your listeners or viewers are going out there, they're probably Google searching or Perplexity searching for it right now, and they might get a slightly different take. I like to boil it down so it's very simple, right? Like an AI agent is really just a specific type of automation.
Mhm.
And all we've done in all that the industry and we've done in this specific automation is we've given a very lightweight kind of think about director, right? Like you're like a cruise director or an orchestrator or a conductor, right? Like of an orchestra. We've given them availability to a lot of different tools that they can use, right? Like, and these like large language models that can accomplish a lot of things. And so the AI agent really is just that automation and that kind of wrapper almost to think about it is how do we bring together a large language model? How do we bring together the tools that it can use to accomplish its task? And then kind of in a very lightweight way, give that kind of package where
Mhm.
not only can you have an answer ask a question and get an answer,
Mhm.
but you can let the agent actually do some of the interstitial steps for you. So it's not just one shot. It's okay, I've got this thing. It's going to collect all this information for me. Really, all it is, it's just this automation that's prompting the LLM a lot
Yep.
and getting some tool work done. That's it.
Yeah, I would use three words to describe that, right? Just like what you said, is humanized robot assistant. Um, but
Yeah.
how do you envision AI agents transforming the traditional two-site-based industry into a skills-based industry, right? Can you provide some specific examples of how this shift might occur in business?
Yeah, we have been, our industry has been that one of largely tools, right? Like and it all comes back to the human. It's the modern airline model, right? It's hub and spoke model, right? Where the human is this hub of everything. And we have all these different tools that we're using. And I'll tell you what humans are really bad at.
Mhm.
Humans are really bad at high throughput parallel information tasks, right? Like
Yep.
it's why do we have spreadsheets and notebooks and all these types of things? It's because we're really bad about holding all this stuff in our mind and using it all together. But computers and AI are really good at that, right? And they're really good at churning through data. And so if you look at this transformation, like I like to show it in web search, right?
Mhm.
Just the web search, everybody knows about it. You go to Google, you do this stuff, and maybe I'm researching a product that I want to buy. And in the past, I have to do all these searches. I'm terrible at it, Helen. I go to Google. I'm like, I want this thing, and it's like, this is I'm like, that's not what I want. So I might have 6 or 7 different Google searches just to find the right set of links for the product. Okay, I
Mhm.
find the product, but it has various links to the different product features. We're shopping for a microwave right now. Do you know how many different versions of the same? It looks exactly the same, right? To me, right? And so I have to drill into that a little bit too. And now I need to do reviews and all this stuff. And I have like 17 tabs open to do that. But if I think about my sister-in-law, she's very skilled at this particular researching thing. She knows how to get like all the deals. She knows where the sites are and all this stuff. That's a skill, right? That she has. She knows where to go. She knows the words to use. She knows how to put this information together. And if you take that example, me using tools versus her skill, that's an AI agent, right? In a nutshell, right? Instead of me doing all these queries and synthesizing the information, I can ask it one query. I
Mhm.
have these, go find me the best microwave for my needs. I have these 3 conditions. And it goes out and handles all those interstitial steps for me, synthesizes it all together, and brings it back. And you can apply, I use that as a very kind of, you know, tangible, right, way to explain it. But you can apply that same pattern to software engineering and coding, right? Like that's a very specific skill. You can apply it to QA, right? Like analysis. You can apply it to financial analysts, right? Like, or marketing capability. And it's not about, you see that and you're like, oh, it's not about replacing the human in that loop. There's no human that got replaced there. It gave me the ability to use a skill instead of having to use all these tools to accomplish my task.
That's very well explained, Bartley, because at the end of the day, asking the right question, right? When someone have the domain knowledge to guide you on what question to ask will really lead you to the information you're looking for. It's very clear AI agents will be that game changing in the workplace, as you described, right? Speaking of that, how do you see AI agents functioning as AI teammates in the workplace? What does this collaboration between humans and AI look like in practice?
Yeah, so the short answer is it will take a lot of different forms, right? And I like that you use the word collaboration, right? Because that's exactly where we see it, right? There's still a human involved in this process. It's just we kind of tweak where the human is in the loop, right? Instead of being deep in the weeds, the humans are at the sides of it, right? Like they're at the beginning, they're at the end type of thing. So I think there's a lot of different modalities. The easiest one to probably wrap our hands around is the co-pilot or the assistant like that, right? Where let's take a different use case. Let's take like a financial analyst type of person. There's a massive amount of data that you have to synthesize and read, and think about the velocity that that data is coming through, right? All this stuff I can't think of a lot of domains where the data changes so fast, right? And so what an agent can do is, instead of the human spending the time looking at that as it's coming through and synthesizing it and doing all this kind of like joining of information, right, and enrichment of information, it can do that extremely quickly. And instead of looking at the data directly, you can have a very natural conversation with it. So it's like you have this really, really smart analyst that knows everything about your data that's coming in, and you can have a conversation and ask it questions, right? So then instead of you going off the human and looking at all that data, you're up leveled and you're asking it kind of like this very, very easy questions and very kind of direct questions. It's like in if you or maybe your viewers have watched like Star Trek. Like I'm a huge nerd, right? So Star
Yeah.
Trek is a real easy parallel for me. It's like how they're just having this natural conversation with the computer, but it's like pulling in star charts and all this type of information, right? That's exactly what this is. It's someone that you can have a conversation with that helps you accomplish your task.
Absolutely. You know, I started my career as a financial analyst. I can totally relate to the example you gave, right? You know, used to be we pull our hairs up to even do analysis. By the time you get all the data information, you know, analyzed, that data was obsolete already, right? Think about that. And then if you want to look at the revenue number, revenue trend, where exactly what the key drivers that, triggered to the revenue increase or decrease, that also was very extensive, like manual intensive, right? So now we've discussed how AI agents can collaborate with us. I love the fact that it's, can be practical and based on the skill set, right, we need for the role. And could you describe a scenario where AI agent ability to gather information from multiple data sources could significantly improve decision-making processes in business?
Yeah, full disclosure, I have an example that I wrote down, right, so that I wouldn't forget it. It's pretty aligned with the financial example that we just talked about, right? But what I want to do is for all of you that weren't there, Helen and I were chatting before we recorded this podcast, and we were talking about education, right? And I want to switch directions because I think this also applies in business, right?
Yeah.
And using agents and in our heads, when I say agent, automation, using automation, right, to help in education, I think is extremely tactical and important and could help outcomes and decision-making processes. So I'm going to make the parallel in education real quick and then we'll jump back to business. So we have educators at all different levels and, grade school, like middle school, college, post-secondary, everything. And then we have learners that are at all different places in the spectrum, right? And it's so hard to tailor this, to personalize this for that particular person. Look at the student faculty ratios, right? They're not optimal. What agents can do though is they can take that kind of single kind of delivery mechanism and they can augment it with personalized ways to reach these particular learners in an education setting. And that can take a lot of different examples. It can be helping the teacher have better ways to do it. It can be helping the student directly. So the student can have like an assistant, right? Like almost, right, their own. And you can take that exact same thing back to business. Think about in your current job, how many trainings have you had to do? Or if you're in sales or like a field operations, right? How can you keep track of all the different products that your company is making and all the different features and all of that? So you can be an effective salesperson or representative of your products in the ecosystem. We can apply that same agentic kind of rationale there where it is, it's tailored to you. What are your knowledge gaps as a salesperson or a product person that's going in? And just like we would do in the traditional education environment, you can bring those agents into business and have it like, look, you have a much more well-educated, well-informed workforce. And Helen, you know this as well as anybody else. The world of LLMs and agents, they're changing so fast, right? Like how can anyone keep up with it? Well, this is a way, right? Yeah.
I was working with a manufacturer the other day, right? They have worker shortage. As you know, the Greece tsunami is coming right around the corner. A lot of people getting retired. So what happened that we have to rely on additional source, meaning people with disabilities, right? They leveraged AI to help people with disability or autism in particular to provide instruction to them so they can become effective workers, right? That's one example that, agentic AI can add so much value to the workforce and then breach that, breach the workforce gap or shortage. So it's really exciting time, right? Now let's shift gear a little bit, right? How do you see the intersection between different types of AI agents? There's hierarchical, mesh, user-facing, background, and how do they play out in a complex enterprise environment? What challenges or opportunities might arise from these various communication patterns?
Yeah, that's a good question too. It probably in our short conversation here in the last like 15 minutes, probably like 5 new agentic frameworks have launched, right? Like,
Yeah.
so I'll have to go check afterwards, right? There's got to be something somewhere. I'll tell you, I grew up in a farm in the middle of Ohio, and one thing that I was instilled in me early on is right tool for the right job, right? Like, you don't go and use a screwdriver when you need a hammer or these other, that's a sort of, and it's no, a joke, but it's very similar in these types of like AI agent frameworks that we have and different ways they communicate. There are the ones that are, like you mentioned, hierarchical or more like mesh or swarm. Mm-hmm. And if I pick just two on opposite ends of the spectrum, a good way to think about it is think about how your company operates, right? There are times where you want to gather experts into a room, give them a high level task, and let them iterate and make a result. And maybe that's around a product launch, right? You need a product expert there. You need a marketing expert there. You need someone who has the technical details experts there. Maybe you have a finance or a salesperson there. And these are all personas you have in the room, and they might get together, they might whiteboard, they might even figure out, okay, we're gonna work on Google Docs, right? That's how we're gonna communicate. And that's like a swarm or a mesh type of agent system where we have these agents and we're like, great, we're gonna put you together. You all figure out how to communicate. Here are the tools you have access to. Give me the answer. But there are other times, right? Like maybe it's you have a predefined process. Maybe this is how you process expense reports, right? Like something, great, don't worry, everyone, we're not going to talk about processing expense report, right? But maybe it's that, right? Which that's a pretty static flow, right? And you might need to gather some more information. That's more of like a hierarchical or like a linear type process. And there are really good frameworks for both of these things. There's trade-offs like everything else. I can let something be super flexible and let all these agents come together and work together and figure out their own communication patterns and everything. And that gives me a very creative answer, essentially, at the end. Think about it that way. But I lose a little bit of optimization there, right? Like there's some overhead that's encountered there. Contrast that with if I have a predefined process, right? Like, or in cyber, I would say like, hey, if I can write a rule for it and I know the rule's going to work 100% of the time, I'll just write a rule for it, right? Like, same thing here. I have a predefined process. I don't need my expense report system, agent system to be super creative, right? Like it can just have access to tools that's doing a mechanical business process or helping me do a mechanical business process. And the point there is there's these different patterns in these frameworks that are suited for different architectures and different use cases. And really, really the challenge is, okay, I've got one that's in a swarm architecture. I've got one that's in hierarchical. I've got one that's in whatever else. How do maybe I want those all to work together. And that's like, that's a really forefront bleeding edge type of challenge that I think the industry is coming to.
Having worked with many global enterprise, as a consultant or advisor to them, that's really managing this diversity in communication is so critical, right, for AI success in the enterprise. Speaking of managing the complexity, data is often considered the fuel of AI, right? With so much unstructured data today, especially audio, video, enterprises face significant challenges. By 2027, there are a lot of surveys I read, and then IDC said there's going to be 1 billion applications by the year 2028, right? How would you address this challenge? I'm just thinking, wow, the tsunami is coming, right? What are we going to do?
Oh, it's only going to get worse, right? Because as we, it's only going to get worse, right? Like, because as we build these agentic systems as well, they're really helpful in that they can accomplish a task for us. But the amount of data that they generate, right? Like think about the amount of tokens that are generated, right? As part of this, if you open up the hood, it's exponential, right? Like there as well, right? Like, and we need that type of visibility for tracing and logging and compliance and all that stuff. So it's only going to grow. Yeah, I mean the good news is that's a pretty straightforward question, right? Like to answer we see it time and time again. And so the good news is like not a new pattern. It's a pattern that we, especially at NVIDIA, right? Like there's a few things that I'll say we're very good at. And this is one thing that we're very good at, right? Like we're very good at accelerated computing. Yep. And that applies across the board, right? Like it applies in cybersecurity. It applies in medical applications. It applies in autonomous vehicles, right? And it applies with agents and automation, right? Like factory automation. And agents are just another type of automation. And so the way we address it is essentially we have all of this, and not just NVIDIA, we have these software stacks that exist that utilize GPU and accelerated computing. The GPU is really, really great at doing things in parallel, right? You know, if you've got a good analogy as like if you go to your average supermarket, right, and you see you have an option. You can either get in the line that has the fastest checkout person ever to have existed, but there's only one. There's only one line, right? Like you can do that, or you can have 100 lines open that are staffed by like us mere mortals, right? Like average speed. That's the CPU GPU essentially comparison, right? Like CPUs are really great at that sequential task, right? Like GPUs are really great at parallel tasks. So now let's bring it back to agents. You might have, if we think about that creative agent example we talked about, let's take it back to the marketing example or the product launch, example. What we find is that it's useful for these agents to go down many different paths at once, because you might want them to kind of discover the space, right, or feel out the room, right? Like it's almost like an interpretive dance. We're gonna use the space right around us. To make it tactical, think about if you have one that's doing in part like a text to SQL type operation, a human language, and now I want to make a structured like query out of it. It's useful to do a lot of different variations of that because some aren't going to work and some are going to work and some, you know, there's all the reasons. And GPUs and accelerated compute are so good at that parallel thing. And if we bring that back up, at the beginning, we talked about what are agents, well, they're these LLMs, and they have access to all these tools. And to do my job, I might need to use 5, 6, 7 tools. Well, what if I had to do all the tools in sequence, right? Like, what if, here's a good example. When you go to the grocery store, to keep that one, I bet everybody here, I bet no one does this. I'm probably the only one that does it. But you have 10 bags. What do? Do you take them one by one into your house? Nobody does that. We load up as many bags as we can take into our house. And that's what we want to do with these tools. I don't want to go use one tool, come back, another tool, come back, another tool, come back. So because GPUs are so good at that, they're really good at parallel tool calling then. They're really good at all of this. And agents, right, if we're talking about agents now, agents are really good at turning information into knowledge. That's the thing they do. We go back to the financial analyst one at the very beginning. It's got all this information, but really what you want is you want that distilled for you, right? Like there's a lot of noise there. You want that distilled into knowledge that you as the human can then operate. And so combine those two things. We want to have all this processing that happens in the back, parallel tool calling, all of this. And then we also want to shove as much data through it because we want to distill that data into knowledge. Those are kind of like the two ways we're going to kind of approach this kind of data deluge, right? Like of the future is we can't look at all the data. It's impossible. And so, but now we have agents and computers that are really, really good at churning through data. And we have the accelerated compute backend that enables that kind of operation.
I love what you just said. They're so vivid to think about going to a grocery store and then the need to parallel processing the data and then how you turn data information into knowledge, right? But I'd like to like drill in a little bit more about how we can make better use of that data, right? Can you explain how an AI query engine might help organizations make better use of the data assets? What specific improvement in accuracy or context awareness do you anticipate?
Yeah, let me, I always like to use NVIDIA as an example, right? Like we're obviously really interested in agents and AI, but I think it's important that people know, hey, we're kind of living this with you right now. So we're getting all the benefits, and I think more importantly, we're seeing all the pain too, right? Like because we're so early and things change. So we like to fight through it, with everybody else so that we can help. And I have a great example of kind of switch gears. If we think about software engineering and more specifically like QA type of thing, every organization that makes software or hardware is going to have some type of like bug tracking system, right? They're going to have whatever they use, name whatever one you have. And what you typically do is you go and you file your bug, and then someone looks at the bug, and then they might add a comment, and they might assign it to somebody, and then they'll get feedback. It's this very like kind of process. We just went through this exercise where we took our bug tracking system, which is, you don't have to just imagine that your standard bug tracking system, Jira or whatever you might have in mind. And in addition to like a RAG system on top of it, we put an agent there as well. And what that did, we made it essentially a agentic RAG. And so then what you can do is you can now, instead of having to like know the bug, or instead of having to go check the bug and then go to GitHub, right? Like, and pull that information in, the software QA or the engineer or whoever the person is assigned to this can ask a really simple question. It's like, hey, what are the most important bugs I need to work on today? Right? Like, and then it gives you the list, and you can be like, tell me more about that one, and it'll give it to you. And then you can even suggest a fix right there, right? And even in just the like, okay, I want to find the bug, right? Like, and I want to like figure out what the right path forward is. We see, it's a hard measurement, but like roughly we saw a 10% increase in efficiency or increase in accuracy. You can kind of make the same comparison, right? When we did that test internally and rolled that out internally. So you can apply the same thing everywhere, and it feeds back to our earlier messaging. Is the benefit is you've got this agent doing this perceived reason loop, perceived reason act loop over and over again. And so of course, compared to like traditional RAG, if you add an agent onto it and make it agentic RAG, you're going to get an improved accuracy because you can pull in additional sources of information with tools. You can reason through it, right? Versus just a one-shot kind of approach.
That's fascinating because I'm currently working with insurance tech for a startup, right? It's challenging when you got a QA team who are not involved, engaged with product development. You literally have to onboard them. And then, the amount of time involved to ensure the accuracy of your product development is very manual intensive, right? Having a capability like this is a step forward. So with AI agents handling more data processing, what do you think the role of human employees will look like? What new skills or focus areas will become more important for human workers?
Yeah, it's good news, I think, for human workers. They're going to be, I think it's great. I use, full disclosure, I use a lot of AI in my daily work, right? Like I do a lot of AI sites, right? We have our own internal AI things, right? And it really helps me stay organized. It helps me keep up on all these research papers, right? They're so informationally dense. And like you and a lot of your, all your listeners, like there's so little time, right? Like, and so how do I keep up with it? Well, I can use AI to distill that. And what it's going to do, and what it does that for me is it makes me like my own little mini CEO, right? Exactly. I've got these helpers that are distilling and funneling information up. And that's what I tell people it's going to do to humans. It's going to make you, the human, us mere mortals, like it's going to make me, I'm just an engineer, right? Like it's going to make me an engineer, my own CEO, right? It's going to be able to upskill so much of what I'm doing, take the drudgery and take this pain out of having to sift through all this data. Where did I put that file? Is that in Google Docs? Is it in SharePoint? Is it in Slack? Is it in email? Like think about all these things that you go through, much less distilling information and helping you make decisions. So humans are going to be the decision makers, even more so in that. What that means on the other side is humans need to be able to make good decisions, right? Like, and so they're going to focus on the outcomes and the actions. And that means things like critical thinking ability, ability to take an answer and kind of decompose the parts that like, yeah, I like that part, I don't like that part, right? A good example, I used AI to write a job rec recently. Like it's perfect for a job rec. And I gave it a prompt and it gave me something back. And 80% of it was good. And there's like 20% of it, I was like, I don't like that part, right? Like, and that's what I tell people, there's this constant push between faithfulness, right, and utility. And in that scenario, it didn't give me something that was 100% faithful to what I asked it for, right? But that's okay. It got me 80% of the way there faster than I would have got there. So the utility while the faithfulness was not 100%, the utility was very high for me.
Mm-hmm.
But what I had to know was okay, I don't like these particular skills it put in there, right? Like I don't need someone with that skill or that skill. I had to be able to decompose and push these things out, which required me to have domain knowledge. It required me to have knowledge about how NVIDIA operates like as a company, which I had. And if I have to boil that all up to something that's kind of generic, I boil that up to critical thinking and kind of like thought processing, right? Like just like the agents are doing this thought processing for you, humans are going to have this like kind of critical thinking ability to do that. There's, I think, less important skills. That would be my number one. I think the second one, if I could just have two, is the ability to not be afraid, right? And I'll take this back to my days as a CS professor. One of the biggest challenges I had, believe it or not, with freshman engineering CS students was they were often so afraid to like write the code because they're like, what if it's wrong, right? And you have to almost say like, it's okay if it's wrong because you can iterate on it, right? And these types of things. And I think humans now have to be available to be like, okay, I'm going to try this thing, and I know I might not get that 100% faithful answer, right? But that's okay because I'm going to iterate on it. So the ability to think critically, and then the kind of confidence to say like, yeah, I understand, I'm going to iterate on this, and I'm going to make it better.
That's really profound, Bartley, right? I got two key points here from you. One is the balance between faithfulness and utility, right? Understanding that the difference. Two is that the ability for not being afraid. That's why kids oftentimes are so much more innovative because there's nothing for them to be afraid of, right? But evolution sounds like it will be an exciting shift. I share that excitement with you. Now, let's talk about something a little bit more concrete, right? Can you provide an example of current business process at a customer that involves human pain, suffering, and explain how an agentic workflow might reduce or eliminate this pain?
I got it. I got it because I lived it. So we have NVIDIA. We make these things called blueprints, and they're really ways that you can anybody can go and get started with these agentic applications. And one of them we have. I know you'll like this, Helen, as a security expert. We have one for security vulnerability scanning, right?
Love that.
So we lived this. We were trying to release a piece of software, and it was like it was a couple years ago, and it was maybe like right before the holidays. All of my engineers were off, and they come to me and they're like, "Bartley, we have these like 20 CVEs that popped up. We need to figure out if we need to remediate all of them." So I'm in this Excel sheet experiencing this pain, right? And I'm like, I hate this. We hate this. So we talked, and we made this blueprint. And there's quite a bit of interest in it, and some customers are adopting it. But what it does is it's very simple. You've got a scan, and for people familiar, you've got software packages, and they might have these things called CVEs. They're just vulnerabilities in the software, and they get updated all the time, right? New vulnerabilities are already. How many times have you seen an article that you need to go update your iPhone, right? Because there's something, right? Same with every piece of software you own, times 100, right? On the enterprise side. And it takes, you get this list out, and you're like, here are the 20 criticals and highs, they rank them. And then a person has to go and say, okay, is this one real? Okay, we've mitigated that one in code. Okay, we need to do this for that one, right? It's a very human task. Multiply that by the number of products you release, by the number of versions you release, right? And it's huge. And so we have an agent that does that too, because it's something the agent's really good at. The agent understands. It can go and grab the SBOM, the software bill of materials, what pieces make up this application. It pulls in information from NIST about the vulnerabilities. It pulls in information from your enterprise, and it generates a checklist for every vulnerability. And it's like, hey, to figure out if this one's real or not, I need to do these 7 things. This is not the human. This is the agent that's doing it. It does that for every vulnerability, and then it will go and execute that checklist. Okay, I need to do the first thing, second thing, third thing, fourth thing. And the great thing about it is the end of that process is this giant, essentially, page of text. Think about it, it's like having a conversation with itself, right? Reasoning about it. And we take that huge amounts of text, tens, hundreds of pages of text sometimes, And that goes to another part of the agent, which summarizes it. And it doesn't summarize it just anyway, it summarizes it specifically how a security expert would want to hear it, right? And then for you, this is going to be a deep cut, but I know because cyber, you do some cyber, right? There's cyber stuff sometimes. We also then take that summary and we align it to a VEX justification, which those of you who know, you know, those of you who don't, it's just a standard way that we say, oh, okay, we did this and here's the reason. Just a standard way to do that. And so the human then, instead of looking at spreadsheets and going to GitHub and emailing people and Slacking people and all these types of things, they get a report back which has a toggle, and it has the bottom line up front, right? The bluff. And then everything after it is like, here's the conversation that happened. So if they don't like the result or if they don't agree with it, toggle, and you can see everything that happened. And that's where those critical thinking skills like come back into play, right? And all that. But a lot of times it just works, and you save yourself hours, half a day, right, of this, and you're able to scale. And we use that internally at NVIDIA, and it's a blueprint, like shameless plug. It's a blueprint that anyone can go and look at NVIDIA.
Absolutely, right? We all need that. And then regardless of what business we're in, the size of the business we're in, right? It's just, it also gives us some comfort level in terms of where exactly we're at, and then where we need to invest our time and energy to improve. So it's, you know, based on that, it's clear that AI has a lot of potential to streamline workflows and ease some pain points, right? Thank you for sharing that.
The last thing I'll add there, right, like is I know we made that very specific to vulnerabilities, right?
Yeah.
But if you think about any company that's shipping software, like especially like a startup, right? And I know you mentioned like even in your book, right? Like the 5 disconnects to accelerate growth, right? This execution disconnect. Right? Like is, okay, well, how am I going to manage my resources? Do I have enough time to do as a startup a software release process that might be like this? This is a perfect time for these agents to come in and help, not just with pain, but augment a company that might not have those same types of resources.
Exactly. You know, I can talk to you for another hour or two, but because, you know, I just can't. I mean, you have not only technical knowledge, but also the business knowledge, right? It's just, I've picked up so much from you through this conversation today. But before we wrap up, CES is right around the corner. Will there any major announcement coming from Jensen's keynote that we should look forward to, or are you going to be at CES?
Oh my goodness, yeah, you can't trick me. No, so CES of course is going to be really exciting. Like, you know, there'll be a lot there. The one thing I can say is I would encourage everyone to tune in to Jensen's keynote. It's on the 6th, right, of January, and I may be there. So if I'm there, please, everyone look me up. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's in my backyard, so we definitely have to connect if you're in town.
Yeah, absolutely. But no, CES will be exciting. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, awesome. So you can't share anything yet, right? So we'll just keep that way for now. And
it's like, stay tuned.
Okay.
It's the to be continued.
Sounds good. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today. You know, I find it not only refreshing, but also impactful, right? Here are our like 4 key takeaways from our conversation today. Number one is AI agents will transform how we work. It has already shifted the focus, right, to a certain extent, but it will continue to shift the focus from tools to skills in the enterprise. You give such, you know, great example about being financial analyst, how it can help us not only to perform tasks, but also collaborate, reason, and take action on behalf of us on a role-based, you know, tasks, enabling faster decision-making and more efficient workflows. Unlike the traditional tools, think about it, require manual input. AI agents can proactively gather data, process that, execute action, allowing humans to focus on higher value, higher level decision-making and strategy. Number 2 is this agentic searching, right? I mean, that's already or is going to revolutionize information retrieval. We all know the traditional web search often requires multiple attempts, right? To click and click again after 5 or 6 clicks, maybe you'll find the right information. And in contrast, AI agent can understand the context of what we're looking for and gather information from diverse sources more quickly and accurately. And then the agentic search will be more like having a personal assistant who knows exactly what we need. You know, the example you give about your sister-in-law, right, it really resonated with me. And then hopefully we'll have a SME next to us and be our humanized personal assistant to support us. And thirdly, is the data. We talk about data as the fuel, but really scale, want to scale that requires AI query engines, right? Enterprises are generating massive amount of data. But the sheer volume and variety, especially unstructured data, we talk about audio, video, make it really difficult to leverage effectively. You talked about how do you turn data into knowledge, right? AI query engines are really critical for making sense of this data. These engines will connect AI agents to the data, enabling faster and more context-aware responses. AI agent will synthesize and act on the data, transforming raw information into actionable knowledge without needing constant human intervention. I can't wait for the days where it can help us figure out, right, in what makes sense and in a very fast manner. Lastly, is AI agent will automate the complex workflow, reduce some human pain. Traditional business processes we talk about often involve manual, tedious tasks, right? Your cybersecurity information, that example, really, really profound, right? It really talk about with agentic workflow, AI agents can streamline a lot of processes for us, automate the routine task. Not only identify vulnerability for cyber, right? Really point out, what we can do and then what needs to be done and, what are the actionable items we can follow up with by managing these heavy lifting of data processing, decision making. AI agent allow human to focus on creative, strategic tasks, making business more agile and responsive. What I love the most about what you said, we're not going to be replaced by the machine. We're going to be upgraded by them. So I see that as human 2.0 in workplace. So thank you again, Bartley. We've learned so much from you about the agentic AI and how it's transforming the enterprise today. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Stay hungry, stay bold, and stay grateful.